Good morning, everybody. AniNews, Season 3, Episode 6 content. We got Subaru's new dragon, Curse Power, and how Priscilla saved him, which is very interesting. I didn't think Priscilla actually did anything other than maybe pulled him out of the water. I thought she was the one that healed him until we learned about his dragon powers. But let's get right into it and see what happened.
I think it's safe to say Subaru got pretty lucky here.
Yeah, main power, main character energy. Oh, just kidding.
Subaru instead gained
Wait,
an
do we see
enhanced
like her
mutated
face there? Hold on. What?
Krush got turned into some apparent bomb.
Ooh, yeah, you can see her neck is fucked. I think whenever I watched this episode, I thought that the sheet covered her entire face like a dead, like what you do to a dead person when you pronounce them dead and all that. But yeah, her face is fucked. What if it stays? I was thinking there would be one more loop, so I feel like it wouldn't stay. But yikes.
Subaru instead gained
it was only her neck though.
Like Krush got turned into some apparent abomination.
Yeah, her chin looks normal. Yeah, you can very clearly see the veins here, and then they disappear on the chin. I think there's bandage on her eyes.
Subaru instead gained an enhanced mutated leg far stronger than it was before.
Okay, well, Krush is just unconscious, right? Or is she sentient and just like depressed? I don't know. I mean, they're both have like cursed appendages, but you know, a leg is gonna be less important than a face, anyways.
Kinda like Emiya from Heaven's Feel now. It's a bit too early to say whether this buff is here to stay, but for now it looks like Subaru will be making the most of it. As for what it is, well, that's what we're gonna talk about here. An apparent curse currently at odds with the existing curse already inside him. We'll go over that, then the details we didn't get to see from Subaru's adventure with Liliana and Priscilla. A lot of Priscilla.
Yeah, when did they split up? Oh wow, it's really red. But when did they split up? I feel like they were together, and then Subaru's running for his life, and Julia saves him. Holy, that is so red.
Charm didn't make it into the anime. Episode 56, Conditions of the Night, covering chapters 1 to 3 from volume 18 of the light novel.
New cover?
Subaru's opening scene was actually pretty interesting since in comparison to the cryptic description we got in the novels, the way they visualized it here was amazing. We actually got to see the Curse of the Beast duke it out with the Curse of the Dragon. To describe it the way that the novel did though...
It's interesting that it's the Curse of the Beast. Is that because all of the beasts are made... Was it by Daphne or Satella? I think that's made by Satella, right? So this is Satella's creation's curse versus the dragon's curse. I mean, Satella should win, right? But does Satella's offspring win? Nah. You know, that makes sense now. I was kind of wondering how on earth the beast's curse could keep up with the dragon curse. But I forgot that Satella made them, so it makes sense.
The only thing Subaru could hear was all sorts of voices echoing in the distance. Whether it be a battle cry, a grieving wail, a scream, or a sob, noises of every kind rained down around him. They swirled his head like some kind of vortex. If he had to explain it any way he could, to Subaru it was like someone he'd met after a long time was now opening up about everything, swallowing him whole in an unrelenting flood of noise. Eventually such noise started to make him lose track of where he even was, then after that his entire sense of self started to blur together. Who he was no longer felt distinct as countless voices overwhelmed his very being. Those voices then became dark and stagnant, almost like they were trying to break down his identity next. It was as if they were trying to reduce him down to nothing. So, the more those voices overwhelmed him, the more Subaru sunk into that darkness, and the less he was able to resist the progressive deterioration of everything that was him. It was right as he was about to resign himself to that darkness that a thread bound around his core would reject it. Something deep inside him refused to stop fighting even when Subaru had. It was actively going against the darkness, trying to throw him into nothingness. So, as these two mysterious forces fought to claim ownership over the self that was Subaru, each tried to kill the other, all so that they could take Subaru for themselves. The novel never described what those two were, but as we'll soon find out, one is the Curse of the Beast while the other is the Curse of the Dragon. It's an interesting way of highlighting these two supernatural forces now currently dwelling within Subaru. Switching over to when Subaru was saved by Priscilla, a lot of her most arrogant lines were cut to get to other things. For as conceited as she was in the anime,
why is Priscilla immune to the Sirius's whatever the fuck? So far, the only two people that are immune to it are Reinhard and Priscilla. What do they have in common? They both have a legendary sword. Maybe the sword gives them powers. Maybe.
novel makes her 10 times worse. This actually works towards building her charm though, since there's some pretty banger lines highlighting just how witty she is. I mean, when you have her suggesting Subaru spoon out his own eyes for being useless, you get to see that this is a whole separate level of pompousness. Now, if you're wondering how it is Priscilla had even found Subaru, well, it was as she was on her way to execute the person responsible for flooding the city that she would notice a certain commoner floating downstream. We know she was also looking for her retainer Schult too, but to her the crime of defiling the city like this was unforgivable. So much so that she was on her way to bestow her own suitable punishment.
Yeah.
Liliana just so happened to stay close since Priscilla was competent, but that's essentially what these two were up to. When they switched their focus to Subaru's leg, what was revealed underneath was this revolting pitch-black ligament that no longer hurt. It was a feat impossible through any sort of healing magic since, as far as the principles for that went, it simply increased the natural recovery ability of a patient's body, not to regenerate limbs like what had happened here. So, rather than the gentle power all his allies used so proudly, this grafted abomination was a desecration of everything healing magic stood for. It spit in the face of the miracle Felix, Beatrice, Garfield, and even Rem all shared so willingly. Now, aside from Priscilla's shockingly callous experimentation on Subaru, the result of it reminded him that this had something to do with dragon blood. It was a reveal that led to a discussion about what this could possibly mean for him. So, as soon as Priscilla heard it was caused by Capella sharing her blood, she instantly knew it was something akin to a curse. Reason being that, from what she knew from ritual practitioners up north, a rite such as this was actually quite common for curses. Whether it was a curse or not though, if this was in fact the same dragon blood Liliana mentioned in her song,
yeah, because dragon blood is always associated to the covenant. And the covenant's basically a curse. It's a what do they call it? A vow binding? Or okay, wait, dragon blood is always a covenant. And covenants are forms of like afflictions. You could have a curse, a vow, and a covenant. Anything else? A pact? I think that's synonymous with vow, I think. Yeah. So I wonder if Capella is the same Capella from 100 years ago. Smashed the dragon. That's why she was, outed. Because why are we smashing a dragon? Dragon's like, don't worry, I still love you. Here's some blood. Now she lives forever, and she is a lust archbishop, and they all lived happily ever after.
The miraculous nature of it made it seem like it could do anything. As for the other great treasures the holy dragon left alongside it, they were mentioned to be the dragon tablet and the covenant. Two lore-heavy concepts I'm sure we'll see.
Okay, so the three treasures were the actual covenant that protects the kingdom, the tablet, which I think was the thing that was like an oracle, so it would tell you. I don't even know what the tablet did. All it said in the anime so far is that it announced that the last candidate was found. In that case, Felt, and then the blood. So getting blood donated to you is a good thing. Apparently, it's a treasure. Maybe Capella from 100 years ago had blood donated. Yippee. And it turned her into an icky sticky monster. So the royal family was like, gross, you're not part of us no more. And then the witch's cult found her and said, we'll take you in. Here's the witch factor of lust. Go crazy. There we go. Okay.
See more of in the future. To keep the focus on Subaru though, the fact his neck didn't heal the same way that his leg did put into question just how much of a treasure the dragon.
And how does that make any sense? Is it just like so is his leg cauterized? And then what's coming out after that the drag, because like, maybe does it not circulate into his body? How does it only? I don't know.
Blood really was. Like, if this was all it could do, then Priscilla couldn't help but mock the legend this sacred dragon was supposedly known for. This was an insult Liliana didn't take too kindly, since despite her non-confrontational nature, mocking the dragon was unacceptable. As a
Thanks for
bard whose
legends.
job was to sing and preserve the legends of the past, the holy dragon who had the greatest legend of them all was pretty much their biggest benefactor. It was essentially the one thing keeping them all employed. It's for that reason such slander wouldn't be tolerated, so in order to get Priscilla to retract her words, Liliana would request she cut off Subaru's head immediately. Since all this was just a simple matter of disbelief, to
Why are we getting
prove
blurry?
Priscilla wrong and verify the veracity of the Dragonblood's power,
Veracity
all she
mentioned?
needed to do was watch the Dragonblood reattach Subaru's head to his body. Obviously, Subaru objected, but an interaction like this was a nice comedic moment after all that intense stuff with Capella. That said, the main thing to take away was that healing was limited to Subaru's leg. Whether it's because of true dragon blood remains to be seen, but this wasn't the time for experimentation. Now, when discussing the flood,
So Capella's blood is just cursed dragon blood. It's not real dragon blood from a real dragon, so that's why it's limited.
the archbishop supposedly used as punishment, if it was in fact meant to be retaliation, then Priscilla found it to be rather half-hearted. If these archbishops were even half as evil as everyone made them out to be, then she was fully expecting something even more despicable. The fact that this was all they did, though, indicated to her that they likely valued their demands far more than causing suffering right now. Even so, at the end of the day, this still was another one of Subaru's failures. Had this been a younger version of himself, then back-to-back L's like this would have made him fall into despair for sure. I mean, he'd died to Sirius 3 times over, let Amelia get kidnapped by Regulus, had Beatrice fall into a coma, got toyed with by Lust, then let the city be flooded out of retribution for his own actions. So, to him it was truly pathetic how little he'd accomplished.
I really am surprised we're not getting a reset yet. Like, they're adding so much information. You think that this is the loop that sticks. But, like, we've lost too much. I don't think the city being flooded, at least now, is gonna stay. I think when Subaru's going to reset again, and I think a lot of stuff is still gonna happen. Like, Amelia's still gonna get kidnapped. The city will get flooded eventually. Lust will re-say the 3 new demands, but I don't think we're gonna have casualties this time. I don't remember if anyone died while fighting Sirius, but that's gonna get prevented. I don't think Mimi's gonna get injured. Crucia's not gonna get cursed. We probably don't get our dragon leg. It's like, I think, but Amelia's still for sure getting kidnapped. So, yeah. But I think, like, the smaller, like, you know, Mimi's encounter, maybe Otto's encounter, I don't think any of that's gonna stick.
It's even after all that, though, that Subaru was still committed to pushing forward. If he was to compare it to what he went through during the witches' trials, all this was still nothing. It wasn't nearly enough to make him give up yet. That's when the 3 of them would get jumped by demi-beasts, which were a fundamentally different type of monster from demon beasts. As incomplete monsters from birth, it was only fitting to refer to them as such. Combine this with their inherently flawed designs, and what you get are creations made as if to mock the living. Their obvious defects were a clear indication that this was what their creator was going for. Luckily, this meant they were usually missing one or more of their senses, so that made dealing with them a whole lot easier. That said, they were still formidable enough monsters to take out civilians. So it was after Priscilla eliminated them with unexpected precision that there was a cutscene involving Subaru finding a civilian. He would rush over and perform the first aid Clint had taught him, stopping
We need to go back here real quick.
He would rush over and perform the first aid Clint had.
Okay, Clint. Puck mentions that he fought someone who spoke similarly to Roswell. I think everyone Okay, personally, I interpret that as an earlier version of Roswell. Say Roswell B made their C, whatever, whatever. A lot of people thought that he was talking about Hector. I think Hector's authority is in Clint here. Because what the flip? Schizo theory. I know he is suspected of having an authority, and the Witch of Vanity is still alive, so I don't think Vanglory's authority is out there at all. And you have Hector of Melancholy. I don't think he's around no more. You know, we haven't seen him ever. I think he's gone. So his authority is on the loose, and we have a fellow. I think it's mayors is what this branch is called. Maybe the Hector mayors, passed along his speech impediment along with his style into the Roswell family. Both branches have Hector's look. It would kind of make sense. And I know he's also like super old. So he was there, he was roaming the earth while Hector was alive. Hector croaks, drops his authority. Clint comes over here and picks it up, and boom, there we go. So I think this guy has Hector's authority. I have no proof. I just think because they're similar and Roswell doesn't have it. So if Roswell had an authority, it would be Hector's authority. But I think it's this guy instead.
Taught him, stopping the bleeding and creating a splint for him. He would then carry this civilian back to his shelter, bringing us to this crucial scene with Liliana. A quick interesting thing to note before that though is this peculiar statement Priscilla made to Subaru before the shelter. He didn't understand what she meant by it, but I imagine it's because he has a tendency to show up when it matters most.
Blurry.
Like, if not for being saved by Priscilla or even coming across this injured civilian, Subaru never would have been able to find out that Sirius's authority was affecting everyone in the city. As for when he figured that out himself, the first hint was the frustration he started feeling towards Priscilla's indifference here. Since she was clearly unaffected by everyone's suffering, that level of disregard just didn't sit right with him. Her arrogant self-confidence had become so unbearable that all he wanted to do now was rip off the mask that she was hiding behind.
Oh, yeah, blurry.
This obviously wasn't how Subaru normally felt, so that ultimately led to his realization that this was wrath. If you're wondering why Priscilla remained unaffected herself, well, her ego was so strong and sympathy for others so non-existent that to Subaru he felt the sharing of emotions was practically impossible for her. It was the only reasonable explanation that could justify her resistance to it. Now, seeing it affect all these people.
So when it comes to emotions, she's immune to it. I wonder if she would still share pain though.
Down here also helped Subaru realize his understanding of it was far too simple. What I mean is that before Sirius explained her authority as a power allowing people to understand each other, but after seeing this, Subaru knew it was a power that forced people to isolate themselves. With the way its resonance strengthened when more people were around, it was only natural people would start to avoid each other once fear and unease took over. So if the first instinct of everyone was to remain alone, then there was really no fellowship behind Sirius's power at all. Luckily, Liliana's music resonated with people's very souls, stealing their hearts back and returning it to them. It was a power she was well aware she possessed, making it extremely convenient that Priscilla just so happened to be going from shelter to shelter. This left Subaru with a whole new sense of motivation, since by knowing he could trust these two to defuse the situation at all the shelters, it allowed him to focus on taking on the main problems. So, although so much had gone wrong already, Subaru was committed to turning everything around no matter what. Now, if you're wondering why Priscilla was searching for Schult, it's because he was a retainer that she actually valued. Al she knew could take care of herself, but Schult was someone she felt personally responsible for. His charm was also something she deemed irreplaceable, so finding him was on the top of her list of priorities. This brings us now to Subaru's encounter with the demi-beasts, which through lots of running, went to prove his right leg was far better than he could have ever imagined. He could feel it was way more fit than it ever was before. In fact, when a beast had cornered him and charged right at him, Subaru was actually able to jump right over it. Unfortunately, he'd get surrounded by 2 more, but that was when Julius would intervene to save him. A little recap would then piece together how the fight went on his end, finishing up with the flood providing the opportunity for escape. Based on how the fight was going prior to it, the flood was really more of a blessing than a hindrance. Reason being that it's highly likely they would have incurred casualties had the fight gone on longer. So this was yet another instance where the flood seemed rather odd, adding to the mystery behind who could have possibly done it. It was just super weird since there were far more benefits for them than there was for the witch cult. Fast forward now.
That's why I think it was Al, because if, Al's like, my friends were in trouble, flood.
And Felix's breakdown would be far more emotional than what we saw. Ricardo had actually had to hold him back, even bare his fangs since Felix's abuse was unacceptable. Felix would then drop to the ground and claw the floor, all while verbally abusing Wilhelm and Ricardo. It was after this that self-loathing would overcome everything else, since if his healing was useless in the time that it mattered most, then what was the point of having all this power to begin with? To him, being the country's best healer meant absolutely nothing right now. It was a title that probably just made his burdens even heavier. If he couldn't even save the person that was most important to him, then Felix couldn't help but feel worthless.
What's happening?
He and everyone else couldn't do anything but regret their own weaknesses right now. Julius was no exception either, since his failure weighed heavily on him too. By not being able to defeat the opponents Subaru trusted him to take care of, he was being a lot more apologetic and even anxious. It was so apparent and so out of character that both Subaru and Ricardo would have to scold him. Such words made Julius wonder whether
my friends are fighting again.
He even knew what fear meant at all, to which Subaru would state his mindset is because he did know fear. He knew it all too well, and it's for that reason he worked hard to ensure he'd never experience it again. So, despite Subaru being painfully aware of everything that went wrong, it's his reflection on those failures that make it possible to keep moving forward. Reason being that, to him, the scariest thing in the world was losing the connection shared with someone precious. To no longer be able to wish for the same experience.
Okay, I thought of Amelia. Then they go to Rem. Oh my god. Who is this person?
Experiences they once envisioned together before, well, that was far scarier than anything else. So long as there were still things that they could do, Subaru told Julius that they just needed to keep trying. All messing up meant was that they needed to make up for it by taking action.
Don't worry, we can mess
One
up.
failure
I can
shouldn't
return,
prevent
but
any of them. This would be where Subaru would start his conversation with Anastasia, but considering the massive chunk that was left out from that, I'm gonna combine that with Amelia's scenes for a part 2 video.
Part 2.
The key thing I want to focus on to end this one is the exaggerated feelings each character displayed as soon as Subaru entered City Hall. Like, Felix felt regret far greater than he'd felt before, Wilhelm wallowed in self-doubt and self-reproach, Ricardo bore his fangs out of indignation and annoyance, then Julius was filled with doubt unbefitting the finest of knights. Every person was acting in a way Subaru would consider abnormal. This was because they were all bearing their hearts more, which was a direct result of Sirius's influence. Her authority was affecting those in City Hall too. Something you may have been able to pick up on had Wilhelm, Ricardo, and Julius' emotions been more apparent, but that was something the anime unfortunately left out. But yeah, that's...
So even if you never saw Sirius, her authority spreads? Really? That's OP.
It's half of what we missed from episode 6.
Oh, well, Anastasia did see Wrath. Anybody else? Not that's with us. Interesting.
I'll finish the other half with another video on Wednesday, but until then, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then feel free to leave a like and comment. Now, before I go, just a reminder that I've re-released new and improved versions of the Succubate shirts. If you've ever wanted to get them before, then now is definitely the best time to.
Keep the Succubate shirts.
So be sure to check them out at succubate.shop.
It looks like, what's her name? Albedo. Well, I learned a good bit, kind of, sort of, maybe. I have more thoughts or more questions now, but Sirius is OP with the flip. I'm telling you guys, Klein is he's the current melancholy holder. Priscilla, we already knew she was awesome though. Yeah, not too much right now. If you guys did enjoy, let me know. If you guys have any thoughts and questions, type them down below. But yeah, same time next week. See you guys next time. Peace out.